growing up, I never really knew what mental well-being and what mental health was, innit? I just always thought I was this kind of like angry boy. In order for you to be a man, it's like you can't have no feelings, innit? You just have to just be like, like, I'm big and I'm bad. I think it actually takes more courage and strength to actually talk about how you're feeling.
Hey, I'm Katie J, and welcome to Young Scot's new This Is How I Feel podcast, where we talk to guests who've grown up or live in Scotland about their experiences and how they cope in the world we find ourselves in today. In each episode, we'll tackle a different topic with a brand new guest. And today, we're really looking forward to chatting to Bemz all about men's mental health. Now, Bemz is a Glasgow-based rapper, I'm sure you're aware. His debut album, Saint of Lost Causes, was released in 2020 and was nominated for Scottish Album of the Year. In 2022, Bemz won BBC Introducing Scottish Artist of the Year award, and there are so many exciting plans for 2024 as well. So we've got lots to talk about. Thank you, Bemz, for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Look at you.
Look at you.
Look at that outfit.
I promise we did not plan this, it just happened.
You look incredible.
Thank you very much.
That's so good. We're both giving like comfy energy today, right?
I can't lie, I had to like change out of a full tracksuit because I was like, that might be a bit too comfy, you know, so I thought I'd style it up a little bit for you.
I love it.
Thank
you for making an effort. Because you would have been sent home if you arrived in your tracksuit. So that's good. Now, every episode of This Is How I Feel, we ask our guests a pretty simple question. How are you feeling today?
I've not actually thought about that. I'm chilling. Good. Grateful to be here. Yeah. For once, I'm actually good. I'll take that.
It's a weird one, that, isn't it? Because your default is just like, yeah, I'm grand.
Yeah.
But when you deep it, yeah, you're just, pleased that you're not in your trackies, I guess. Or not.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't lie. If we're being very honest about that, the full black essential tracksuit sounds a bit comfortable. Do you know what I mean? But no, I'm good. And how are you?
No one's ever.
Oh.
No one's done that yet. I'm all right.
That's a bit.
I'm a little sleepy, but it is because I have arrived essentially wearing jammies, so I didn't dress up for you.
Wow. I see how it is.
But I'm good. I'm excited to get this chat going and hear about what you've been up to.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's all right with you.
Yeah, it's okay with me. But I'm glad to hear that you're good. And I want to apologise on behalf of your other guests for them not asking how you are.
Well, actually, yeah.
Because I think it should be a mutual thing.
I know. Just dawned on me that they've all been really cheeky. Right. Now, let's hear a little bit more about your journey, okay? Wow. And how you got to where you are today. Obviously, you arrived here pretty late. So, I mean, in life, not today.
You did not need to air me out like that. That was absolutely uncalled for.
How did you get to where you are today?
It's a long story, that, if we're gonna like take it back or whatever, I guess. Born in Nigeria, which is where I started life. Moved to London, when I was about 3-4. And life was just life, innit? Like that was the life that I knew because I was fairly young. And from there, went through school, the whole lot. And then moved to Scotland when I was like 14, 15. And then decided to start making music. Moved to like Stranraer. I don't know if you know what that is.
It's just wild to me that somewhere on your journey you ended up in Stranraer.
Yeah, honestly, it's very, it builds character, and I'm so glad that I went there because it's like, I don't think I would be as, confident as I am now without going to Stranraer. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, it's a very, 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 very interesting place, like they speak like Galloway Irish or something, do you know what I mean? So it was like very hard to kind of like understand what the hell they were talking about. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it took me a bit to actually get it, and it kind of opened my eyes to a completely different culture. Do you know what I mean? And I started my music career there, which for me, I think looking back on, it's a blessing because, you know, ain't nobody checking for a rapper in Shinra, do you know what I mean? So it gave me like all the time to like make all my mistakes and do all the silly stuff, you know, and actually learn, you know. And then from then I was studying sound production in Air College.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was like traveling up and down, and then eventually I moved up to Air when I was just before my 19th birthday. I was in Air for the summer before COVID happened.
Right.
Yeah, so Air became home. You know, I gained lifelong friends, like fans, I guess, you know, because see what used to happen, it's so funny to look back on, was like we'd turn up to Glasgow for gigs and there'd be like 50 people from Air on a train, right? Absolutely, like just causing it, you know, and that was how I kind of really kind of started getting a name for myself with the bookers and stuff in Glasgow, because they're like, who is this guy? Where did he come from? And why is there 50 people in our venue going tonto?
Packing out the slot rail services. I mean? What's going on?
Hey, we were just doing our bit for the economy. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, and then I kind of took a bit of a break. Took 2 years off music just to kind of figure out life and where I actually really wanted to be. And then moved to Glasgow. And I thought it was going to be like the greatest thing ever. And then COVID hit. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And that actually, this is so mad because that actually ended up being a good thing. And I feel bad whenever I say that because it was such a bleak time for everybody, you know. But for me, I was in a situation where it was like, as a musician, I've never really ever made money in the sense of like gigging and stuff. Like I was still fairly new, so I wasn't really making any money, and making music was a very tough task, innit? But COVID happened and I got furloughed. And the way I seen it in my head was, I'm getting paid to make music. So like, I'm sitting in the house doing nothing, but someone is giving me 80% of my wage. All right, cool, you know? And that's when I made the Saint of Lost Causes project. And that was a kind of like reflection of those 2 years of me like not making music because I felt like a lost cause. And there's like a wee insight to it. So my middle name is Jude and the patron saint of lost cause is Saint Jude. Do you know what I mean? So it kind of like really, really felt like very me. And yeah, after I released that, the rest is history, as I say, you know. It really went from strength to strength, you know, and we've been consistent ever since. And like you say, you know, with multiple Say Award, What's Good nominations and a long list, made the shortlist just there, BBC Scottish Act of the Year, Sama Award winner, you know, DJ Mag winner. You know, I can sit here and say all the accolades, but, you know, I don't want to sound big-headed.
No, keep on. I know there's more.
Yeah, but, yeah, so that's kind of really how we ended up here in a very short way, you know?
I think when you're kind of recounting your story, you can almost, well, you can literally pinpoint on a map the different stages of your life, which is quite fascinating in itself. But what I find really interesting is the moment you decided to stay put, focus on you, was when all the creative juices started flowing to kind of launch your career. Was that the first time, those kind of 2 years and then into COVID, that you'd really stayed still?
Yeah, and it's not, you know, I mean, in Air I was kind of like still, I guess, but I really struggled with finding a purpose, I guess. Do you know what I mean? It was really a case of, you know, I was just making music and I'm like, it's whatever, innit? Like if it happens, it happens, you know. But obviously, during the COVID years or whatever, as most people will know, I ended up finding out I was going to be a dad as well. Do you know what I mean? And that, I think, is the key thing that really made me say, right, it's either you're all in or, like, forget it. Do you know what I mean? Because music is an expensive thing, you know, and so is having a child, you know, so it's like, could I justify spending the money that I spent on my music as a hobby? Does that make sense, you know? And that really, really made me sit down and evaluate, right, what you're going to do. And I doubled down on it, you know, and thank God I did. Do you know what I mean? Because I can't lie. So there was a period where I was like, yeah, is this really the route I want to take, you know? Or I could have just played it safe and just went and just, you know, carried on working just to, you know, provide for Nova, you know? But I decided to go music and paid off, I guess.
And now she gets to witness the crowds coming to see her dad. I mean, there's some beautiful pictures and videos that you've posted of her kind of like, oh my goodness, what's all this about?
Yeah.
Obviously, they're here for her. But how beautiful that is.
Yeah, it's special, you know. And what's good, she's at that age now where if she hears my music, she's like, that's daddy. And I'm like, yeah, that's daddy. Do you know what I mean? I can't wait till she's old enough and I'm selling mixtapes to all her school friends and that. Do you know what I mean?
And then you'll be really uncool and she'll be like, stop it, Dad, stop. You're embarrassing me. But right now it's good, so you can just embrace that. So obviously, Nova, massive motivator for you now.
Yeah.
But take us back again to that time when you're, you know, a kid figuring out, first of all, what the heck people are saying in Stranraer. You've got no idea what's going on. Retreating to your bedroom, kind of creating music. When did you find out that that was something that you, number one, loved and secondly, were good at?
Music has always been something that I loved, like from growing up in Nigeria all the way through to London, and even before I got to Scotland, it's like a very, very like healing thing for us, isn't it? You know, and it's very important. Whether it's Afrobeat, whether it's rap, whether it's like gospel music or whatever, it was just something that was instilled in us. Do you know what I mean? So obviously coming to Stranraer was a big shock, I guess, and it's because like, see, in London, like I grew up on a time where grime was still very much like underground. Do you know what I mean? Where, you know, UK rap was still just like building. Do you know, like Giggs, for example, who's probably one of the biggest like UK artists. He was like a local boy where we grew up. Do you know what I mean? So it was like, it was a very, very like low key moment, but it was very, very pure, you know? And then you move to Stranraer, you know, and it's like, you get into Stranraer and all people are listening to is like Makina or like US rap or like techno and all that stuff, you know?
Or Shania Twain or
I don't know.
Taylor Swift?
No.
Okay.
That's a you thing.
Okay.
Please don't put that on Stranraer. Stranraer's cooler than that. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And now all they listen to is Bemz.
Yeah, exactly. See what I said? Cool. Jesus. You're making this very difficult. You know that. I'm trying to tell a serious story.
On you
like,
go.
Shania Twain. Yeah. So where was I?
So they're listening to a sound that you.
Yeah, that I was very unfamiliar with.
Uh-huh.
Do you know what I mean? And which is, I guess, again, a beautiful thing because it kind of opened my eyes to different form of music, different sounds. And I remember, again, like, just being in my room. I used to always, like, rap with my brothers, but it wasn't, like, anything in it. And then I come to Stranraer and I'm like, right, okay, what's happening here? Who's here? Who's doing what? And then we just started just writing music, innit? And it really started out in form of poetry at first. Do you know what I mean? And then, I was just like, let me record this, innit? Let me record this. It's so funny because the first ever song I recorded is on YouTube somewhere, innit? Yeah. Nah. You ain't finding it. You ain't finding it.
Well, how?
You just won't.
Listen, if I can find things. Don't you worry.
The last person who said they could find this wagered a bet on it. And they had to buy me a new football top if they lost. And I've got a new football top in the house. So I'm telling you, you ain't finding it.
They've obviously never had a dodgy ex-boyfriend. I can find anything. I can find anything.
So are we setting a challenge here?
Go on.
Are we setting a challenge here?
I'll find that YouTube video.
Shake on it.
Okay. Check back next week.
But so we just done it, and it was like I say, it was it was a laugh at that point. It was just like, look, Bemz is rapping.
Right,
Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
But for me, again, and this is what I mean about being able to make all my mistakes and stuff, you know, because for me it was like, yeah, I was just writing lyrics, rapping and recording, and they were not good. Do you know what I mean? Like hindsight is like, you know, I mean.
But you were a young kid figuring it out, right? The
yeah,
pressure's
no,
off.
of course, you know, and it's like, but some of them was just like, just terrible, man. Do you know what I mean?
And we'll insert a clip here when I find the video. Yeah?
Yeah, it was very, very great, you know, but it helped, like, which is the most important thing, you know. It was like, it made me realize that, right, okay, this is actually kind of fun, and this is actually a good hobby, you know. So rather than like, you know, doing other things, I can just make music. And yeah, and the journey began, you know.
Aside from the elements of cringe, of course, do you look back at that and think it's quite nice because it's essentially a diary of what I was experiencing as a young man at that time?
Yeah, you know, and this is what is so important about what you said earlier on about how you can basically like pinpoint, you know. So it's like with my music, it's so crazy because my music essentially can literally tell you where I was at what stage in my life. Do you know what I mean? And that was like literally like what that was good for. You know, it was like, looking back on it, it's like, oh my God, this was when I thought this was this and that, and so on and so forth, you know? And we just built on that, and I'm very, very grateful for it, you know?
Do you know what's lovely as well? I mean, I'm not sure you'd want her to know everything, but Nova can also trace that and go, this is the whole trajectory of my dad's life kind of spelled out for me as well. It's quite cool.
She better not do that.
Right.
She better not do that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, of course,
if we did a radio edit of some of them.
Please. But no, 100%, you know, and I feel like because my music is kind of like at its purest form, it kind of gives people an insight into the type of person that I am, you know, and you know, if my daughter do someday go back and listen to it, I hope she can see how we got to where we got to and what it cost type thing, you know.
We've spoken about how your gorgeous wee daughter has given you a real sense of purpose, which is just a beautiful thing. It really is. What about other things that have taken you on that journey? Because we all have peaks and troughs with our mental health. I know you've been very open about your experience. And actually, can you just tell us a little bit about your journey with your mental health?
How long do you have?
Well, I'm cutting you off, so you've got 2 minutes.
Yeah, so what's growing up, I never really knew what mental well-being and what mental health was, innit? I just always thought I was this kind of like angry boy, you know what I mean? Like who's just annoyed at everything at every time, innit? Short fuse or whatever. But I've kind of had a very traumatic like life type thing, and I never realized how that impacted me as a person. And it wasn't until I was in air, I think I was like, what, 22, 23? And typical fashion, I just split up with my ex at the time. And like, it was very, very like intense and overwhelming. And I couldn't understand why, like, the sadness I felt wasn't a typical sad. It was like crippling, you know? And that was when I actually decided that, yeah, oh, wow, I need help. Do you know what I mean? And that was when I actually started looking into what mental health and mental well-being and everything was, you know? So I'm 30 now? So it's been a 7-odd-year journey, do you know what I mean? And then, you know, COVID again really, really played a very, very big part in that too, because I was kind of like, you know, I had been getting help and everything like that prior, but, you know, now being in a position where there's no distractions, you know, it's like I'm in the house with just my thoughts and that's it. Do you know what I mean? You turn on the TV, it's like gloomy as hell, you know?
Yeah.
And that was when I then decided again, it's like, right, I'm going to double down on this. So I started therapy, you know, and all of these things have played a very, very important part to the fact that I'm still here, you know, because if I didn't, realize that there was something wrong, and it was something that I won't say could be fixed, but could be managed. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think the worst could have possibly have happened. Do you know what I mean? So it's been a very, very interesting journey, and I'm grateful for the journey, because in that journey I've been able to find myself, and be at peace with the fact that some days I will be sad, some days I'll be happy, some days I'll be, anxious, I've accepted that that's who I am. And after accepting that, it really, really then made it easier to manage, So, yeah.
It's really powerful, actually, just hearing you talking about taking that initiative to go and seek help in those moments, because, it is quite a gendered issue as well. Yeah. Women are probably more likely to access that support. I think a lot of men struggle to, confront those emotions and those things. I know that's a very generalised, sweeping statement, but the stats speak for themselves as well. So congratulations for asking for the support as well, and also thank goodness you did.
No, 100%, man, 100%. And that's the thing that is a bit mad, because it's like men really do be suffering. Do you know what I mean? And for some reason, I don't know, man. Society is mad, isn't it? Because like more time, it's the things that the patriarchy or whatever has put in place that's really, really now coming back to affect us. Because it's like, in order for you to be a man, it's like you can't have no feelings in it. You just have to just be like, like I'm big and I'm bad and thingy. And it's so funny because like when I talk to like young men and I'm like, I think it actually takes more courage and strength to actually talk about how you're feeling. Do you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, you can bottle that up all you want, bro, but it's like what ends up happening is like your emotional bucket ends up overflowing and you end up losing the rag at people who ain't even do nothing to you. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, I realize that it's like someone could like step on my shoe or something and I'm like going crazy. And they're like, bro, it's not that deep. And it's like, yeah, it actually isn't that deep, but it's like, that was just the little act that caused my emotional bucket to spill over, because I didn't used to empty it in the sense of like talking to people and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, like I really do think as men, we need to do better for each other. Do you know what I mean? And actually like start breaking down the
stigma? Yeah,
the stigma around being weak around it, like. And right now it's getting even worse because it's like you have like mad people on like social media and podcasts talking about like just like men and how men should behave and it's becoming rife, and for me I feel like it's very, very sad for the younger generations who are like on TikTok and stuff, do you know what I mean? Who have got some mad guy telling them that they're not manly enough for feelings. Do you know what I mean? Which is like literally like the one thing that every human being on this earth shares. Do you know what I mean? Like we all have feelings, and I think it's mad for people to push a narrative that you can't feel it or you can't talk about how you feel,
I mean, that portrait of toxic hypermasculinity is really frightening.
Oh yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And I don't really understand how people can't see it for what it is. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? But again, I also believe that those things tie into like your mental well-being too. Do you know what I mean? Like let's say you're a very anxious person or you're a very shy person. It's so very, very easy to buy into something as toxic as that, because you feel like that's where you can find happiness. You've got this guy telling you, oh yeah, you need to get the money, you need to do this, and your life's going to be great. When really it's like, that don't even fix nothing. Do you know what I mean? Because if it did fix something, you wouldn't have so many like rich and powerful people, doing the worst to themselves. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah.
Do you ever get along the way people saying, oh, this is so refreshing, like music must be such an outlet for you, that's your therapy, and you ever have to go, it is, but I also do therapy.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like, you know, music is a big therapy for me, you know what I mean? But I feel like me being honest with all the other things that I do around it lets people know that it's not just as easy as me writing music. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like, if I, you know, I can come here and say, music, man, music is what, music plays a part. Like, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of work that goes into, you know, staying afloat. Do you know what I mean? And it's not just me writing music. That's just a part of it, and it helps. So I feel like if I can be honest with that, then maybe one person can hear that and think, oh, right, okay, let me go try this. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah.
And have you had that reaction from people?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fortunate to be in a position where, which I think is weird, but like people kind of like see me as some sort of like guy. Do you know what I mean? And
steady on.
And I know you do too. Don't worry, it's okay. and you know, and I've had like, I mean, after this I can show you DMs, you know, and it's like people coming up to me. I remember the first ever podcast that I'd done about like some mental health, and this girl DM'd me, and she was like, my partner had been like struggling so much, and he like listened to you talk and he could relate to what you were saying, and it kind of like gave him the motivation to kind of go do something about it, because he's like, you know, there's someone else out there who feels the exact same way I do and they're willing to talk about it. Do you know what I mean? So he found courage in that, and for me that was like, it's a bittersweet moment, because it's like, wow, oh my God, I can't believe that someone heard that and is doing it. But at the same time I'm like, damn, do you know what I mean? Like,
this is a big problem. Yeah,
I'm like, a lot of people, you know, and I'm like, you don't even know me like that, and your mans don't even know me like that. And if he's feeling the way I felt, then boy, like, my heart goes out to him type thing. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it's bittersweet, but you know, I've had that, you know.
But how nice to be like a part of the solution, you know, like a small part of helping people feel like they can approach their own mental health in the way that you found comfort in your journey, you know? Because otherwise it's just all these toxic portraits of people saying, bottle it up, bottle it up.
No, of course. Like I can't say, I don't know how to word this without sounding mad, innit? But it's like, yeah, it feels nice, great. I don't even know if that's the word I would even use, but it's like, it shouldn't be on some guy called Bemz to be able to spark change, I guess, because it's like, I think as a society, it needs to start from way younger. Does that make sense? And it needs to, like, people need to be able to, you know, be in a position where they feel comfortable in their homes, in their schools or whatever, to be able to like be like, I don't feel good. Do you know what I mean? Like, or I feel anxious. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, to be part of a solution, I guess it's like nice, but
it's uncomfortable.
Like, yeah, but I really do feel like as a community, as society, and like overall, I really do think more work needs to be done, because a lot of people will fall through the cracks. Do you know what I mean? A lot of people who may not have access to someone like a Bemz who's willing to talk about how he feels and stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like, they'll fall through the cracks, and that's a shame. Do you know what I mean? Like, because we all see the effects of like not having the right support around you, do you know, especially from a young age when you're developing, do you know what I mean? So, yeah, it's nice, but I just feel like a lot more work needs to be done, you know.
Is that something that you felt when you were young? Obviously, I mean, we spoke about you being all over the place kind of thing, literally. Yeah. Did that displacement sort of affect your sense of, I don't have a positive role model here that I can see doing what I'm doing or is on my journey?
Yeah, 100%. You know, it's like, it was part of the reason why even I went to even therapy and even try like unravel all that, because, you know, being from 14 and moving to Scotland, you know, away from everything that you know, away from like everybody that you love, you know, and it's a very, very trialing period, you know, and And it really, really, really affected me in the sense of like I said, I was like a kid and I didn't really know how to explain how I felt. I was feeling things, but it manifested itself in like anger. Do you know what I mean? It was just like, oh, just raw rage, innit? Do you know what I mean? And like I say, you know, looking around me and it's like, there ain't really nobody even doing anything positive to tackle that. And that's not on anybody. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not here saying, oh, how comes you didn't do this for me or whatever, innit? It's like more a case of like, the God honest truth was when I was looking around, all that was there for me was go out drinking or you know, do things that at that age I shouldn't be doing. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, I kind of live my life in a way that it's like, be the change you want to see in it. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, I know that I would have benefited from somebody kind of just being there and saying, you're little man, like, it's okay, you know? Do you know what I mean? Like bro, you just moved whole country. Do you know what I mean? It's okay to feel sad. You know what I mean? You've just moved from like a place where you know everybody to like this random place in the middle of nowhere. Back then I was like, this is weird and I hate it. Do you know what I mean? And that manifested itself in me getting into a lot of trouble and also me having to feel like I had to learn how to be like a chameleon and not really be my true self to kind of like fit in. Do you know what I mean? And that also has its own problems. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, so that's why now it's like, I just try to be as pure and authentic as I can to be able to pass that on. Do you know what I mean?
Any other young black men who'd moved up from London, kicking about Stranraer at the time? Any role models? Anyone that you could see that was like living the same? You know, this is the thing, because again, it's like you're looking around, you're going like, right, where have you put me?
Yeah. You know, see, coming from London, and it's like just bare black people, innit? And then I moved to like Stranraer, and it's like what, a 50,000 capacity or something like that. I could be wrong with the numbers, but it's like
capacity. I love how you're describing it like an arena.
It's the music in me, man. I can't help it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, I sold out Stranraer.
You could.
Soon come. But it's like, you know, I get to a point where it's like me, and there's this other girl who's there, and she's like a black girl, and there's two. And there's two.
And there's two of us.
No, like wait, it gets even mad.
Okay.
So there's like, in the whole school, there's like 2 black people and 2 mixed race people, and that's it.
Right.
And that's not even just in the school. That's like the community. So it's like my auntie knew that person's auntie, that person's mom. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, it was just this small knit community of like 5 families. Do you know what I mean? And that in itself was like, whoa, you know? And obviously with that, kids are young, kids don't understand things, and that just bred racism as well, do you know what I mean? Which, again, is a very, very toxic thing for the mind, isn't it? Because it's like, brother, how do you hate me just because my skin color is different? Do you know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me, innit? Do you know what I mean? But obviously, I hadn't really ever like experienced that like that. Because like when I was growing up in London, it was like, on my estate, I was like surrounded with people who look like me, sound like me, innit? Do you know what I mean? Obviously, we had like the subtle stuff of like, you know, you walk into a shop and the shopkeeper is like following you around. But to us, that was normal, innit? Do you know what I mean? So then when you move to a place and like, people are looking at you funny and they're like, bruh. Do you know what I mean? Like, that in itself was mad as well, you know? But hey, like I say, it built character, innit? Do you know what I mean?
True. It never feels like that in the moment.
Yeah, of course. Like it's like, you know, but what it taught me about the people of Scotland is, like, there is like a handful of dafties, but there's like some really, really cool people that will like, you know,
they've got your
take
back.
you in type thing, innit? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was kind of like the saving grace, because it kind of like opened me up to being like, right, okay, I'm different, this space is different, but like there are people who actually love that, do you know what I mean? And it's not everybody who thinks it's a negative, do you know? Yeah. So if I start you know, putting myself in positions, in places where I can feel loved for being who I am, that would definitely help, you know, and here we are.
Welcome to my time machine.
Okay.
If you had the power to reverse time and go back and speak to young Bemz kicking about Stranraer, what advice would you give a slightly younger version of yourself?
Do you know what's so funny about this? It's like, I know what advice I would give, but I also know that I'm very strong-headed and I probably wouldn't listen. Do you know what I mean? Like,
completely. I can see that for you.
Bruh, who are you talking to? Do you know what I mean?
I'm going to figure this out in 15 years. All right?
I guess it would be a case of like, everything will be okay. Like I feel like that for me would probably be like the most important one. Just like, it'll be good. You know, it's terrible now, but it'll be good, you know? And then also I'd then go into like, be yourself. Like, be unapologetically you. Do you know what I mean? And then also like, figure out why you're such an angry guy. Do you know what I mean? Like, because I feel like if I figured that out at a younger age, it would have saved me a lot of issues. Do you know what I mean?
A lot of trauma.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
A lot of problems with you know, yeah.
Again, though, like, see when you're that young and you're just, everything is the worst thing that's ever happened in the world, but you were actually going through some pretty massive stuff.
I was going
things.
through it, man. Do you know what I mean? You know, like, we've had some losses, like some major losses, and but I'm good. I'm here now, so we're grateful for that, you know.
Okay, well, we'll go in the time machine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we'll go back and we'll say to Bemz, you got this.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got this, and it'll be fine. Yeah.
But pipe down.
Yeah. A little slap around the head and that, like, bro, behave. Not everybody hates you, you know.
Bemz, thank you so much.
No, thank you for the time machine.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Bemz. This conversation has been fantastic. So thank you to everyone who's tuned in for listening. Remember, if you need help or support with how you're feeling, Young Scot has tons of information at young.scot/AYE. That's AyeFeel. If you'd like to follow Bemz, you can find him on Instagram and TikTok using @BigBem1. You probably already follow him. Also, don't forget, if you're under 26, then make sure you get your free Young Scot National Entitlement Card with thousands of discounts, subsidised public transport, and a whole lot more. You can also claim 100 Young Scot Reward points for listening to this episode by using the code MUSIC. So that's it from me. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of This Is How I Feel. And if you have, then please rate, review and subscribe to us, which means you'll get instant access as soon as the next episode drops. Looking forward to next time already. See you then.